mortgage with me for this house. I want to sell this debt to you, to another bank, basically, or what?
Yes,
how does it work?
there are many things that they could do. One is that to sell it, part of it or entirely, so that you're transferring the risk to another, or you may buy. What the bank may buy insurance to cover that particular loan. And that's another form of actually transferring the risk.
Okay. Now we're going to be going to risk in a while, but let me get to the question of, so if we have this sort of basic inkling of what derivatives are, that it's a way of selling off or making more transactions based on a previous transaction, then was this normal practice among banks in the past, or is this a new invention that people sort of thought up and decided, hey, this is a neat way to make even more money from a straightforward transaction?
Derivatives has been around since the 80s. They became very popular since then, and they just got to be very sophisticated. Meaning that sophistication means they could get an asset and make so many forms of derivative
from the same asset.
Yeah.
But eventually, for example, if you reach a crunch time where all of the people, let's say, who were paying off their housing loans, which was the basis of all of these things, and then they stopped, so then, am I correct in the way that the way the thing started unfolding was that I'm a bank, all of a sudden people aren't paying me, I have to call in, I have to repossess the house. But then if I'm doing that, or many banks are doing that all at the same time, all of a sudden the value of the houses is going down.
Correct.
Which means that all the other transactions that were based on that transaction suddenly aren't worth
that much anymore.
And then, so will you explain to us how then this starts, the dominoes start falling as a result of this?
Yeah, because it's fairly complicated in terms of the way the subprime mortgage problem had been multiplied. Because if it were a straightforward loan, so they would have just defaulted, the banks would take over, and that's it. No? But since they turned around and made turned it into cash and made money in the process, and transferred, like in effect, the part of the asset to other people, then that created more opportunities for growing, let's say the initial value. So, and there are other institutions that came in along the way. For example, as I said, there are some people who, let's say...
A very good example, if I may suggest at this point, is AIG, which was not a bank, but which was an insurance company. Now, on Bloomberg, they were saying that what happened with AIG was pretty straightforward, that AIG insures things.
Yes.
And one of the things that it insures are loans. And that, for example, if a bank normally, and this is my layman's way of trying to work this through, if I'm a bank and I have a loan, I can insure it with AIG. The benefit for me as the bank is that I don't have to have the capital on hand to cover that loan right away, and then so I can use that money for other things.
Yes.
Now what happened was when people started worrying about how sound these loans were and whether AIG could cover these loans, the banks suddenly said, well, if there's a chance that AIG can't cover the insurance, I better have my money here just in case. And the only way you can do that is by suddenly unloading assets, but then if everyone is doing it at the same time, you're never going to get that money back. Is this the way we should?
Yeah, that's a very good way of presenting it. And that's really actually what had happened. That while the banks and other financial institutions and realized, as you said, that the asset that they were holding on, the value was going down, and of course that means losses for them. And some of them could take, the losses, but many of them couldn't because they didn't have sufficient capital to back up the losses. So, and though that's in the case of Lehman Brothers, for example, that was the case. That's why they allowed it to fail.
And then, so going back to your point on trust, now that everyone saw that this was happening, everyone wants to hold on to what they have, and they don't want to be lending out to each other.
Even in the financial system, that's the sad part of it. That's what's creating the problem. If the very institutions that are supposed to be lending to one another are not doing so, then what more the final part, the one lending to the public.
And that's where we are now, where everyone is sort of in this state of suspended animation.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when we return, more from Warren Buffett and the continuation of our vocabulary building exercise.
And so when you look at where we are going, there seems to be two issues that are apparent to me, at least: risk and leverage. We just lost sight of risk and leverage.
Yeah, well,
what was appropriate.
People will do, again, because it pays off for a while. I mean, you can use leverage, and it's the only way a smart guy can go broke. I mean, it basically is if you owe money, you can't pay tomorrow. If you just pay for everything and you do smart things, eventually you get very rich. You can do smart things and use leverage, and if you do one wrong thing along the way, it can wipe you out, because anything times zero is zero. And but it's so reinforcing when the people around you are doing it successfully, you're doing it successfully, and it's a lot like Cinderella at the ball. I mean, at midnight everything's going to turn to pumpkins and mice, right? But as the evening goes along, I mean, the guys look better all the time, the music sounds better, it's more and more fun. You think, why the hell should I leave at 11:45? I'll leave at 2 minutes to 12. But the trouble is, there are no clocks on the wall. And everybody thinks they're going to leave at 2 minutes to 12.
And you're having a good time.
Yeah, sure.
Now, in the clip you just saw with Warren Buffett talking to Charlie Rose on PBS, Warren Buffett brought up the concepts of risk and leverage. So I'd like to ask our guest to walk us through these words. Now, we explored in part one of our show tonight what derivatives are and how it got everything messy. Now, let's use that concept to figure out how they whetted the appetite of investors, bankers, and big companies to take on risk, and how they intended to use these instruments, the concept of leveraging. So, Professor.
Well, risk is the opposite of certainty. So risk is equivalent to uncertainty. There may be an unfortunate event, but if I'm sure about it, then I can prepare for it, right? And just like people know that they're going to die, they just don't know when. So for that eventuality, they can prepare for that by setting aside some money or getting life insurance, right? That's because of they're sure that about something like that you can prepare for. Now, in the financial markets, when there's uncertainty, that means there's a risk, and wherever there's a risk, you have to pay for the risk.
Okay.
So the bigger the risk, you have to pay a bigger amount, because, like saying, let's say I'm risking my my brand new BMW 5 million peso worth. There's a risk that it might might be stolen or might get into a crash, so I might lose the entire value of that. But so I do something to prepare.
So, for example, you reduce your risk by taking out car insurance.
Yes,
that's
I have to
thing.
pay higher premium, right? Because it's worth 5 million. If my car is only a Toyota or a Cherry, the premium will be very much less.
Now, Warren Buffett seemed to be suggesting that as more and more institutions, banks, financial houses, and these things saw that there were all these